going to try and structure my reviews a little better than just regaling the plot and being snide, tempting though that is. I'm going to try and look with a little bit more focus on what's good about this game and what isn't, so let's get that done now. I appreciate this review is way too late to be of any relevance, but I am an enigma of a man and I work on my own schedule. Batman Arkham City is bigger than Arkham Asylum, the map is bigger, the villain roster is bigger, the stakes are bigger, and of course the plot holes are bigger. The basic gist of it is that Mayor Quincy Sharp has established Arkham City, which is an entire section of Gotham City cordoned off and turned into a prison of sorts, wherein there is a heavily defended wall packed with armed guards all around the place, but inside the criminals are free to do whatever the hell they want. This idea in and of itself is a bit of a train wreck. For starters, Arkham Asylum was, as is evident by the name, an asylum. It housed insane people who were a danger to themselves and others. I mean, yeah, lazy writing across decades of comics means that every old criminal gets chucked in there for no real reason, but let's just think about this. Does this mean that people who are genuinely mentally ill have just been thrown into a mini-city with next to no law and next to no supervision or care aside from occasional food drops that the criminals inevitably war over? As mental healthcare goes, that's worse than the NHS. And then there's the more benign nitpicks, like what sort of city, even one as desperate as Gotham, would ever allow something like this to happen? It only gets worse when we learn of Hugo Strange's master plan. Basically, Hugo Strange is in charge of Arkham City and he's working for Ra's al Ghul. Oh, sorry, Ra's. In one of yet another of his harebrained schemes to cleanse Gotham. Their plan is to get this whole prison city started, deliberately allow it to fail by feeding the various criminal factions within weapons and the like until the gang wars escalate to dangerous heights, and then enact Protocol 10, a fail-safe that allows his private army, Tiger, to kill every last person inside Arkham City, including political prisoners and presumably the mentally ill. They then plan to duplicate this model in all major cities, including such cities as Metropolis and Keystone, home of Superman and the Flash, respectively. Now, really, Strange, you're a genius, yet this is what you came up with. Not only would absolutely no city let you set up this kind of prison again after the first one ended with the extermination of all inmates, I mean, even if a city somehow did, you really think that by the time it was the third or the fourth time, they'd stop going for it. But, you know, Keystone and Metropolis, the cities that Superman and the Flash live in, not respectively, in that case, do you really think that you're going to get away with that in a city like that? I mean, this is a challenge for Batman, maybe, but someone like Superman would just jump to the top of your tower and kick your teeth in. But yeah, that's the general setup. Bruce Wayne gets himself hauled in there for no real reason. He Batmans up, and then he spends his night gallivanting with various villains. Some as part of the main story, and many, 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 many more as side stories that I didn't actually do in my Let's Play, because I'm lazy. But we'll just, work around that. Now, as I said, I'm not going to go through the whole plot, so try and let me just mention the high points and the low points, and for fun, we'll do it in alternating order!
High point.
The Joker. Not only does Mark Hamill pull out an amazing performance as the character, as he always does, but the Joker's story was a pleasant surprise to me. See, at the end of the first game, after Joker dosed himself with Titan and became a horrible monstrosity, I genuinely sat to myself and thought, there better be some consequences for this. I mean, he may be the Joker and all, but there's no way that's healthy, right? And to be honest, I never expected there would be consequences, and yet in this game, he's sick and dying as a result of that whole misadventure. I mean, to be honest, after something like that, he should be dead, but for a comic book, it's pretty good for a show of consequences. For a lot of people, the fact that he dies at the end was a pretty emotional thing, but I never got too affected by that. For starters, the Joker has died a ton of times over the years, had the revelation that the game coming out next is a prequel, and that Joker will be right back in it, and the death is even less meaningful. Admittedly, this is the end of Mark Hamill's Joker, which is sad, but going out on a great performance is the way to do it.
Low point.
Catwoman. I can't claim to be the biggest comic buff, but isn't Catwoman supposed to be a character, and not just a sultry-speaking, innuendo-spouting S&M pin-up? I mean, yeah, I know Catwoman has always acted sultry, but she does other stuff too, at least she's meant to. The aversion of Damsel in Distress, wherein she effortlessly escapes Two-Face's trap, is a decent touch, as well as the outright inversion, when it's she who rescues Batman, but in a game so dripping in sexism as this one, it's a feeble offering at best, and I'd have loved to see more of her character than just,
"Ooh, look how many sexy kitty puns I can make. Meow." High point.
Batman has flaws! In Arkham Asylum, our dear Dark Knight seemed perfect. He spent all night fighting and defeating countless villains, with only minor cosmetic damage to show for it. He resisted Titan poisoning through sheer force of will. Who knew that victims of poisoning only succumbed because they just didn't want to not be poisoned enough? He also defied the laws of physics by punching Joker with explosive gel sprayed onto his knuckles, and somehow didn't blow off his own arm in the process. In this game, we see a more vulnerable, more flawed Batman. Not only does Joker's blood affect him in significant ways throughout the game, such that his fighting to stay alive is a major plot point rather than something explained away in one line, but he's also far less stalwart. He becomes downright cruel at parts of the game, to the point that you sometimes find yourself more on the villain side, such as with Mr. Freeze. If there is one disappointment, it's that Batman's decision to forsake Gotham City, or rather Arkham City, in order to save Talia is overridden by Alfred way too quickly. I'd prefer to see a lot more conflict in that regard, rather than just having a major out-of-character moment be resolved in a few seconds.
Low point.
Talia gets shot, and practically, if not literally, every female character in the game is called a bitch multiple times. Yeah, as I said, this game is sexist as hell. Maybe it doesn't mean to be, but it is. And I think pointing that out is becoming increasingly relevant in game conversations these days. Not that I'm going to pretend this review is relevant to anything. If I recall correctly, Catwoman is called a bitch mere seconds into the game, and the tone is set from there. Catwoman and Harley Quinn are tied when it comes to characters who the male henchman hurls slurs at, while in the same breath expressing a desire to perform sexual acts upon, or violent acts, or both. Now you might say, well yeah, they're violent criminals. But the lines, way more often than not, aren't written to be repulsive, they're written to be funny. The things they say about Harley and Catwoman are nothing the fanbase hasn't said before, which is extremely disturbing when you think about it. And even if their constant B-bombs and violent sexual fantasies are just the creators' way of being realistic, do we really need that dose of realism? Do women who play this game, and yes boys, they do exist, really need to hear that so often during their playtime? It's frustrating at best and triggering at worst. This is a game in which a man dressed as a bat single-handedly takes down a prison city with the aid of a man in an ice suit and the blood of an ancient assassin. We can leave certain aspects of realism at the door. Not to mention the scene where you find Harley Quinn gagged and bound and you have the oh-so-hilarious option to ungag and repeatedly gag her. God bless the little abuse and humiliate the female victim minigame. Now you might say, but Jamiliel, you can also humiliate the Riddler once you've solved his final riddle. And it's true. His final riddle is a sort of this long gauntlet where if you stop moving you die, and after Batman disables it, he puts the Riddler on the gauntlet and makes him walk it without telling him he turned it off, and you can then stand in front of the Riddler, preventing him from moving and listening to him freak out. But that's a pretty unique and esoteric method of torture, whereas binding and gagging women is the sort of violent imagery that crops up a lot in our media. The absolute worst, as I mentioned above, is the treatment and subsequent killing of Talia al Ghul. Talia, who is a trained assassin, as strong as, if not stronger than her father, truly badass and more of a match for Batman on any day of the week. In this game, she's reduced to little more than a nagging housewife, moaning to Batman that he hasn't taken a life yet. Like, you haven't taken the bins out yet, Batman. You haven't killed anyone yet, Batman. That sort of thing. Anyway, despite her incredible skills as an assassin, she's made into a damsel in distress twice by both her father, who you can forgive for getting the drop on her because why would she expect that, and the Joker, who admittedly was Clayface in disguise, so even if she didn't concoct some sort of plan that involved her being as helpless as possible, she'd still have a fight on her hands there. But the absolute kick in the quad is the moment where Talia thinks she's killed Joker, only to be shot and killed by the real one, her final words to Batman being, "I'm sorry, my love." No, Talia, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that between you and Batgirl you belong to a franchise that insists on maiming and murdering the few strong women it has. I mean, I'm sure Talia's death won't affect other continuities, but this is still a pretty popular series that no doubt many players of which aren't comic readers, and so now there are likely folks whose only experiences of Talia are this game, a Batman-obsessed housewife who steadfastly refuses to show off any of her martial prowess so long as there's a set of testicles present, and a Batman-obsessed businesswoman whose assassin skills boils down to stabbing someone when they're not expecting it, that being the Christopher Nolan film version, obviously, and then getting themselves killed by driving a truck off a bridge or something something silly. Sorry for that language there. And yeah, while the Nolan film had a weird Talia, at least it also had a damn cool Catwoman to make up for it instead of the one in this game, who seems to be designed to make 13-year-old boys too nervous to play the game in the same room with their parents. Though to briefly digress, Nolan and Catwoman getting together with Bruce Wayne at the end is just weird, but he should have died at the end anyway, and that's a whole other conversation. Now, you may disagree with me. You may think I'm overreacting on the whole sexism front in this game, and yeah, there's nothing in it really as galling as, say, Elizabeth from Bioshock Infinite, who literally needs a big strong man to open the door for her, but it still has a generally disappointing aura overall. And now, for a bonus round, plot holes. How come the Joker, who is presumably full of his own blood, survived this illness for months, whereas Batman, who has a bit of Joker blood in him, has only a few hours to live? What happened to all of the people infected by Joker's blood in Greater Gotham? Since Batman drank his share of the cure and the rest of it was spilled, it doesn't seem like the cure made it outside. Did the thousands of people infected with Joker blood just die? How come getting a blood transfusion with Joker made Batman sick rather than just killing him outright? Do they just happen to have the same blood type? That's pretty lucky. If Mr. Freeze is so good at curing diseases, why hasn't he cured himself or his wife yet? It took him a couple of minutes to work out this cure, and yet he's had years to figure him and Nora out. Why is the steel mill Joker resides in seemingly in production? Or do giant piles of molten slag just exist in steel mills even during their downtime? How come nobody is freezing to death despite most of the characters being pretty sparsely dressed? Why is Ra's al Ghul white? I mean, I know this problem isn't unique to the game, but come on, the man was born in Arabia 600 years ago, why would he be white? How does the Riddler have so many informants and people willing to help him set up his riddles? What does he possibly have to offer them? Given the line about Joker feeling himself in this game, and him wearing a thong in the last game, how did any of us sleep at night? Why didn't Hugo Strange keep a shotgun with him in his little room at the top of the tower so he could blast Batman the second he opens the door? How come Joker's death was such a huge deal to the fanbase when Joker's died a bagillion times, even in the cartoon series this game is based off? And Hugo Strange's death barely got a rise, despite him being one of the oldest villains in Batman history. Why does Penguin have a bad Cockney accent? He's supposed to be a mockery of the upper classes. Does ripping out Solomon Grundy's heart not count as killing him? When Bane is trapped behind a metal gate, why does he just stand there and take it? Why doesn't he work on hammering the thing down? Yeah, I know it's just a game, but how does Catwoman grapple around the city with a whip? Why is Batman worried about Joker becoming immortal when he never kills the fucker anyway? Hush is surgically altering his own face to look like Bruce Wayne, but how does he get his fingerprints to match as well? How did Joker pretend to be dead so convincingly that it fooled Batman's detective mode? Is Batman one word or two? Thank you for this review, and I will be back soon with 400 days, which is like a year and a month. Not to mention the scene where you find Harley Quinn gagged and bound, and you have the oh ho 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 ho.